Hello, 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 and a very good evening to all of you today. Thank you for joining right on time. Um, uh, and of course, welcome to session 3 of the Mtarajiwa Rise program. Over the last sessions, we've explored leadership, we've explored grassroots, and engagement, and the importance of generally understanding communities and the people we as leaders seek to serve. And today we are taking the conversation to a step further, and we are going to be focusing on one of the most important aspects of public leadership, and this is policy development. And in tonight's session, policy platform development workshops with the focus of building credible, actionable policy platforms. This session is centered on a very important reality, and that reality is that leadership is not sustained by charisma or visibility alone. And at some point, leaders must, be able to clearly communicate what they stand for, what problems they seek to solve, and how they intend to solve them. And one of the biggest challenges in leadership and governance spaces today is that many policy conversations remain broad. They are unrealistic, or they're disconnected from the everyday realities of the citizens, or a good number of times they are not even communicated properly to the citizens so that they are aware that this kind of policy exists to your favor, or to your favor ideally. And communities are increasingly looking for leaders who can move beyond slogans and present ideas that are practical, are coherent, and implementable, and also responsive to real public needs. So this session today is therefore designed to challenge us to think more critically about governance, accountability, and as well implementation of public priorities, and the process of developing policy platforms that people can genuinely believe in and rally behind. Because, as emerging leaders, it is important for us to understand that strong leadership is not only about identifying problems, but also about developing thoughtful, informed, and actionable solutions. And that at the end of the day, policy platforms should reflect research, they should reflect community engagement, and as well as be able to strategically think about think they should as well be about strategic thinking and clear understanding of the social economic realities of the people we are serving. And as we dive into it, I'm going to be bringing up our speaker, or our presenter of the day, who is Mr. Sule Benjamin, who is a Kenyan citizen with over 12 years of experience in program management, government affairs, and public policy. Before joining the mobility sector as the public policy manager for Kenya at Bolt, where he currently works, he worked in real estate at Akon Holdings as the government affairs and public policy manager. He also worked as the government relations and Kenya expansion manager at Sanergy Limited. I hope I pronounced that right, which empowers cities to build carbon negative systems that offer safe sanitation and produce regenerative food and fuel from upcycled organic waste. He previously worked at the Parliament of Kenya for the Kenya Young Parliamentarians Association, where he managed donor-funded programs, capacity building initiatives for legislators, and helped both national and county legislators develop policies and legislation. He holds a master's degree in research and public policy from the University of Dar es Salaam, courtesy of the Partnership for African Social and Governance Research, and a Bachelor of Science in Biotechnology from Kenyatta University. He is currently pursuing a law degree at the University of Nairobi. Mr. Sule, if you can hear me, I am bringing you up to stage, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that elaborate introduction, Mr. Mwoki. It gives me great pleasure to speak to young people, to talk to young people about what can be the future of Kenya if things are done well, and the alternative, which is you know uh, a failed state in the extreme, or policy proposals that can never really work. So just like Mwoki said, uh, again, my name is Benjamin. I have been in the public policy space for over a decade now, and I really got into it out of frustration. And how that happened, if I may begin with that story, is like he said, I did my undergraduate in biotechnology. That was at Kenyatta University back I finished in 2012. And at the time, if you can remember, Mr. Kibaki was the president. And at that time, uh, he had stopped what was going to be the field I intended to work in, which was the implementation of biotechnology solutions, or what we call genetically modified, agricultural, inputs. At the time, I was working at the what is now CALRO, but back then it was called CARI, Kenya Agricultural Research Institute, at the Biotechnology Center. And what happened is I had just started working there. In fact, it was more like an attachment, really. And I was working in the labs, and oftentimes we would get opportunities to attend events where scientists working in the sector, in the field, would come together and they would present their work. And some of this work was very cutting edge at the time, and even today. Some of the works which I worked in and which I also saw included genetically modified cotton, or what we used to call then BT cotton. BT is a short form for a kind of bacteria. It's called Bacterium thuringiensis, not to baffle you with big names. And the cotton was meant to be disease resistant by introducing a kind of bacteria in it that would help resist the diseases that commonly attacked uh, cotton plants, cotton trees. I also worked on a bit on genetically modified maize and genetically modified sorghum, and all this were for those two crops were to increase production and increase disease resistance as well as pest resistance. And so at the time, this was cutting edge. This was interesting, and we were looking at making Kenya be uh, food secure, because as you all know, Kenya is always importing maize during droughts. Given that it is a staple food, we are always looking to our neighbors, and sometimes through what has been called corrupt deals, we even import maize from faraway countries, because the production in Kenya cannot sustain the demand. And at the time, having worked on this, we saw that if we were able to increase the drought resistance and the disease resistance of maize through biotechnology, then we would be able to, make Kenya food secure. And so you'd, as a farmer, be able to plant your crops, particularly maize or sorghum at the time, which is what we were working on. And you would be sure that despite poor rains or disease affecting your crops, you would still be guaranteed of a good harvest. And then the president stopped all that. And he said Kenya was not ready for biotechnology, and so we could not implement it. And I remember going to one of these events where scientists were still working, because that declaration by the president did not stop the work from going on, the work of research from going on. And at the meeting, because I was still young in the field and I was working with doctors and PhDs and people who'd been in the field for much longer, I remember asking why biotechnology and really agriculture in general was not being made a proper subject in schools, so that as someone grows up, they begin to have the desire and the intent to work in agriculture. To take you back a bit, in the years when I was in primary school, agriculture was a subject. Of course, in primary, it was compulsory, and we used to study science and agriculture. And by the time you were in class 8, you already knew the various breeds of cows, the various breeds of goats and sheep and pigs. You knew how to keep rabbits. If you were in a good school that had space, you had a farm that you could plant your crops, and you could, make your own mulch or fertilizer or organic fertilizer. And basically, you'd clear high school, and if you weren't unable to continue with school, you'd become a farmer and be good at it. But then progressively over time, agriculture was first removed from primary school, and then in secondary school, it was made optional, competing with, more attractive subjects like computers or business studies or even foreign languages. And so I asked, when I was in this meeting with these scientists, I asked them, why was agriculture not being, made a core subject, so that young people can grow up wanting to be, to be the backbone of Kenya, because we were told that agriculture is the backbone of Kenya. And that, if you worked in agriculture, then you'd be able to feed this country. And so I was, it was a paradox for me, because there's this excellent research that we are doing as scientists for agriculture, and we know that agriculture is the future and we are going to be sustaining Kenya. But on the other hand, the government policy, or what government was doing, was crippling that agriculture and crippling the desire to work in agriculture. And so when I asked him, why is there no pipeline to generate, young people interested in agriculture and interested in biotechnology, I was told that is a question for policymakers. As scientists, our work is only to do the research and present it. Whether they agree to implement it or not, that is on them. And oftentimes, as you may already know, research like that ends up on shelves in government offices, and many of them are never really implemented. And so at that point, when this uh, scientist told me that that is a question for policymakers, I decided I wanted to work in policy. I decided I wanted to be a policymaker. I didn't even know what that really entailed, but I knew that if I was working in a place where I could help make decisions that affect this country and that affects what government will do, then that is where I wanted to work. And so in 2013, I began to look for opportunities for study, and I got an opportunity through, like Moki said, the Partnership for African Governance and Social Research. And they partly sponsored my master's program in research and public policy. And my goal when I was going in was I would come out, uh, work in public policy, particularly in the field of science, so that I could, turn the work that scientists were doing into lived realities of, people working in the field. But as fate would have it, at the end of my master's program, I completed that in 2014. I came back to work in Kenya, and the opportunity I got was at the Parliament of Kenya. And so this was in around 2015, 2016. We had just had the elections in 2013, and there was, if you can remember, was the first time in 2013 elections that the highest number of young people were elected in Kenya. And so we had over 40 people who were under the age of 35 at the time elected to the National Assembly and Senate. And that was a historic time for young people and for youth democracy in Kenya. And I went in to Parliament, got an opportunity really as an intern to work at Parliament. And my role was to work with the young legislators. Given that I had the theory, I had learned the policy process, I had done my master's, and now I needed to turn that now into real experience, into field experience. And so I worked with the legislators then. I was attached to the Kenya Young Parliamentarians Association, which I am hoping that as young people interested in politics is an association that you should know about. And so it's an association that brings young legislators together to advocate for and promote youth legislation and policies. And at the time, we were able to come up with quite a number of legislation that affected young people. Notably, we were able to come up with what some of you may know as the 30% procurement rule in Kenya, which mandates government institutions, so that is at the national and county level, to grant 30% of procurement opportunities to youth, women, and persons with disabilities. And so that was the very first piece of legislation that I worked on, together with other actors and the MPs that were involved in it. And to bring us to the point of our discussion today, I also started to learn what was necessary for a young person to first make it to office, but to be able to sustain their influence within that space. And so I'm hoping that by the end of our engagement today, we will be able to, build credible policy platforms, be able to have a policy agenda, be able to articulate it, be able to fund it, be able to implement it, and even as you draft your campaigns around it, you will be able to, move from just having a political ambition, because I believe at this point, many young people who are interested in going into politics, or who are already in politics and are interested in elective or appointive offices, you have the ambition. But what you may not have at this time is the proper governing agenda, and how to turn that ambition into actionable policy that you can sell to the people, but that also you can implement once you are in office. You can move to the next slide. So yes, like I said, our objective today is that you should be able to move from political ambition to credible governing agenda, not slogans. And I know you know many of them. Our election cycles are always filled with slogans. Right now, there's already some slogans going around. I'm sure you know of one term. In the last election, we had the hustlers versus dynasties. And there's always been slogans that are coming along. And as history will tell you, that those slogans do not always turn into actionable policy. They may be able to get you across the line, but beyond that line, you may start shooting blanks. You may run into, blocks that may not be able to sustain you through office. And what we see is that many times, if you don't have a proper governing agenda, you may end up losing the re-election. We're also hoping that by the end of this session, you'll be able to build a platform that can survive scrutiny, not only the scrutiny of voters, but of budget committees, and ultimately of reality itself. Because, sometimes the reality hits you, and as we go along, I will give you examples of how that reality has hit, real life examples, hoping that I am careful enough to not cross the data protection lines that have been drawn by the Data Protection Commissioner, but give you some real examples of people who did not survive the scrutiny of either the voters or the committees or frameworks around which they worked, or the reality of where they actually worked. Next. So we'll begin with the problem with campaigns. And I'm sure this is not new to you. I'm sure you've seen people campaigning. You've probably taken part in campaigns. I'm sure for many of you, while this might be your first roller coaster in terms of campaigns, it is not the only time you've ever participated in one. You've probably been in some campaigns, even if even if they are small time campaigns, whether they are for small positions, whether it is at school or at work. And perhaps the excitement of having participated in one is what has gotten you into wanting to take the next step of participating on a bigger stage and at a grander level. And one of the things, even before I go into the details, I wish it were possible to fully interact with you so that I'm not talking the whole time. But I'm sure that one of the things that you see with many campaigns is that of overpromising. I don't think I could even state this more than the word itself, because the realities even of the last election are still very present with us. Very many candidates overpromise, whether it is at the senior most level, at the presidency, or at governor level, at Senate level, at National Assembly, or at MCA level, at county levels. Very many people overpromise. And the reason why people often do that is because they do not really understand what mandate comes with the position that they are going for. Many people do not understand that this is doable. This is within the mandate of the position I'm going for, and therefore this is what I will promise, because this is what is deliverable. Many people overpromise. You will easily find an MCA saying nitajenga barabara, I'm a member of National Assembly candidate saying how they will build roads, they will do certain things that are not within the ambit of their role. And so they end up overpromising, which many times when people begin to take out the scorecard of what you have done versus what you've promised, then you fall short. Sometimes overpromising also comes with a lack of information, or a lack of the data to support what you're promising. A live example, and I'm sure you have this could be fresh in your memory, is our president in his campaigns. If you can remember the campaign with women, he promised to give, diapers to newborn mothers, to ensure that, maternal care was free, antenatal care was free for the 3 months, and very many other grand promises. But then, when he got into office, the first thing we had on the day of inauguration was that we found empty coffers. So on the one hand, there's these grand promises that were made, but on the other, there's the reality on the ground. The fact that the promises were made without the information and without the data to support it makes that kind of policy campaign unimplementable. Next is the misunderstanding of roles, which I have hinted at, which you find someone campaigning for one role is promising outcomes that are impossible to achieve with the role that he's campaigning for. Another one is costing. And many times as you begin this, you will realize how expensive it can be. As we speak, I have a friend who's campaigning for an LSK position. And when she got in, because the voting is virtual, she also thought that the campaign would be virtual and would not cost her. The reality on the ground is that the campaign has ended up costing her more than she imagined. And so, with a lack of costing, either of the process or of the outcomes that you intend to achieve, that lack of costing becomes a problem with your campaign. Another one is lack of prioritization. And here we have people who end up promising things that are not necessarily the priorities of the people to which that promise is made. Another live example, and it's probable that with this example I might step on toes, is the issue of affordable housing in Kenya. You have probably seen people saying, Nani hana kwao. It's not like Kenyans were living, in the streets before the last election. And then suddenly with the construction of these affordable houses, Kenyans are now living in houses. Kenyans had other priorities. We had priorities around education. We had priorities around health. We had priorities around, the environment. But then that lack of prioritization makes a candidate, invest in something that might not necessarily meet the needs of the people, and that can have consequences. And then finally, lack of a proper implementation pathway. And this could be because of lack of funding, lack of ideas, lack of proper research that ends up giving you a lack of, a dearth in the implementation pathway. I would say that most candidates do not lose because they lack ideas. They lose because the ideas fall or collapse under basic scrutiny. So what is a policy platform? I would say that a policy platform is a prioritized set of issues with clear solutions, with legal grounding, with financial realism, and with political defensibility. As you go into your campaigns, I'm sure you probably craft a manifesto, which is the various, which is a policy document. And I will go in briefly to tell us what a policy is, but I'm fairly certain that you may have dealt with that. When you have your manifesto, does your manifesto come with clear solutions? Does it have legal grounding? Can it be financed? Is there a pathway to ensure that whatever you want to do can actually be financed? And can it be defended politically? Because you are going to be players in a political field. And politics here means that there'll be scrutiny from your opponents, there'll be scrutiny from from organizations, from coalitions of other civil society actors. There'll be even scrutiny from the media. And all this, if you do not have a clear a clear list of your a clear definition, sorry, of your platform, then you can end up falling into issues. It is not just a communication to have a manifesto. It must have substance. And today we want to understand how you can build that substance first. Next. For every policy proposal that as a candidate you will have, whether you're running for the most junior office or for the highest office, for every policy proposal you must have, it must pass this 5-test framework. The first one is legitimacy. And the question you ask yourself in this point is this within my mandate? As one running for MCA, as one running for National Assembly, as one running for Women Rep, is this within my mandate? Secondly, relevance. And here the question you ask yourself is, does it solve a real problem? Does it solve a real problem? Thirdly, is feasibility. And here you ask yourself, can what I am proposing be actually implemented? I'll give an example here. A few years ago, the member of National Assembly for Kiharu, Ndindi Nyoro, had a very outrageous legislative proposal, and that was to make corruption a capital punishment. I don't know if you remember that. And what that means is that if you are convicted of corruption offense, capital punishment means that you would face the death sentence. But look at the person proposing this to the people he is proposing to pass this bill. He's proposing it in parliament, where everyone knows that if we are to look at them through the lens of corruption, there'll be very few people who might live unscathed. And so here you are asking them to help you pass a bill to kill them, or to have them killed if they are convicted of corruption. Is it feasible? The next is affordability. And perhaps affordability may be the wrong word, but the question here that you ask yourself is that, can this proposal be funded? Can it be funded? At this point, I'll give you a few examples from my experience at Parliament. I told you that I got into Parliament and worked as an intern. What I didn't say is that I was an intern for 2 years. And that meant that for 2 years, the only thing I was getting from Parliament was experience. I was getting to meet people. I was getting to engage at very senior levels, attend meetings at very senior levels, attend very senior engagements, but I was not being paid monetarily. And so I thought to myself, the only way to get myself paid is to look for donor funding and create the need for a donor funding for whatever program I wanted to to do, or the programs I was working in. And so I thought the best thing to do here is to look for organizations that are interested in democracy and governance, donor organizations that are interested in democracy and governance, who would be interested in giving me money or giving Parliament money as an organization to implement things that would help us meet our goals of democracy and governance, but also help those organizations meet their goals of democracy and governance. And so what we did was we drafted a proposal, and it was like job hunting in modern day Kenya. You send it, and you only hear them say, don't call us, we'll call you, or just wait to hear from us. And tirelessly for 2 years, that was my work, looking for donors. And after 2 years, we were lucky to get a very generous donor by the name of Ford Foundation, who funded our very first, or my very first program. And the good thing about that is I then have a program that has, that has objectives and outcomes and monitoring and evaluation framework, but also means that I can create space for staff. And so I included myself as a staff and added more people and, you know, created an employment opportunity, not only for myself, but for the few that we worked together to bring that proposal to life. And it was a proposal on what we called fiscal justice. Fiscal, 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 to do with money, fiscal justice. And what we were doing with that program was to firstly train newly elected legislators, both from the National Assembly and from the counties, on the budget cycle. We trained them on the budget cycle because at the time, the donors, after our engagement, saw that the biggest problem with Kenya at the time was the issue of corruption. A lot of money was being lost. There was multiple corruption scandals. And so if we could help the legislators understand the fiscal process better, the fiscal management system in Kenya better, and help them and equip them with the skills and the knowledge to know which questions, to know which questions to ask, to know where to look out for corruption, to know how to basically engage in that process. But additionally, to help them know where there are opportunities for them as office holders to access funding within the framework of the country's fiscal management system. Basically, it means that we were helping the legislators not only oversight the budget process, but also look for opportunities within the budget from which they can get funding to fund their own activities, either as individual legislators or as an organization of young legislators. And so we did that, and it was a program that was funded for 2 years and then renewed for another 2 years. And we had our biggest success. One of the notable things that I'm happiest about to date is that some of the young legislators then who I worked with are still doing an excellent job of oversight. And I'm proud to say in this forum that the senator for Homa Bay, Senator Kajwang, was one of the legislators whom we took through that fiscal justice program and training for over a period of time. And to date, he became the chair of the County Public Accounts and Investment Committee then, and he has maintained that position. I think this is his probably 7th or 8th year running, still as chair of that position. What I'm saying is, can that proposal be funded? And then lastly, can that is differentiation. And what we're saying is, can that policy proposal make you stand out? And what I want to say is that if your idea fails even one of these tests, then it is not a policy. It is simply a campaign line, simply one of those nice tags that you will say that may get you across the line or not, but will not stand the scrutiny that will allow you to be the leader that you actually want to be. We can go to the next slide. So how do you structure your policy agenda? The problem that many people have is that you want to solve all the problems. You come from your ward or your area, and you see that there's a problem with drainage. You've seen that there's a problem of poor roads. You've seen there's a problem with agriculture. You've seen there's a problem with the healthcare. You've seen there's a problem with the schools in that area. And as you get in, you want to solve all those problems. And I can tell you that if you go in that way, then you have also set yourself up to fail. First, because you will stretch yourself too thin, but also because you may never get the funding to solve all those problems. How you structure your policy agenda is to limit it to a few priorities. Limit it to a few priorities. Something that you can say over and over, that people can remember, and that you can actually implement. From that list of priorities, you must identify the problem. And that is usually the first step of policy development. Identify the problem. So what is this problem that you want to deal with? For many of us, when we think about public office, we're always thinking about the outcome first. You're probably thinking about how your financial situation will change once you get into office. How you will move from where you live now to a nicer neighborhood, or how you will get a better car, build a better house, marry a better woman, marry a better man, or divorce the one you have. Basically, you begin to think about the lifestyle you will live, and less about the problems that you will solve. To structure your policy agenda, you must identify the problem. So as a member of county assembly, you might see that the problem in this area is we have poor early childhood education. Perhaps the ECD centers are not enough. And you have done your research, you have walked around the ward or the constituency or whatever your location is, and you have identified this problem. And then you ask yourself, so what is the solution? And then you come up with your implementation plan. When I get into office, this is what I will do. I will do this, I will do this, then I will do this. So you have your implementation plan. And this is how I will monitor the work that we will have done. And if it needs improvement, and that is what is called policy monitoring and evaluation, we evaluate, we monitor, we evaluate, and if things need changing, we readjust and continue to implement. And then a timeline. You've often heard people in their campaign trail say, in my first 100 days, I will do this. Interestingly, in my lifetime, I have only seen one Kenyan president do that, and that was Kibaki, who said in his first 100 days he would make primary education free. And indeed it was. He had a plan that worked then and worked for many years until very recently, when some costs were added to primary education. And we've had presidential hopefuls very in these current times say how they want to go back to making primary education free. But at the time, the President Kibaki had identified the problem, he had a solution, he had an implementation plan, and the timeline he had set to set it off was within his first 3 months in office, which he did. I think at this point, it's good to say that the voters, they don't reward your many priorities. They don't reward your many ideas of the many things that you want to change. They will reward your clarity and conviction. If you can have those ideas, speak about them with clarity and with conviction, then you have your voters, you know, within grasp. Next slide. The constitutional alignment. And here, I think I'd hinted to this, that your policy proposal must align with the constitutional mandate of the office that you're running for. And here I cannot emphasize enough that it is important to understand what roles fall within what roles fall within which position. It's always good to align your mandate with the constitutional provisions of that role, so that at the county level, you're not promising something that cannot be constitutionally granted by that position. At national level, you're not promising something that cannot be constitutionally granted by that position. As a quick example is how people promise roads. And then you get into office and you realize that the road that you promised to build does not fall with the county. That road is under the Kenya National Highways Authority. And so its repair, its development, its construction is way outside anything you could ever do as an MCA to deliver a good road, a good highway. And so you become one who people are saying, or people will say, promised heaven, but is only giving us nothing or hell. Avoid making promises that you cannot deliver. And how you do this is that you understand the constitutional mandate of that role. I think it's good to say here that if you promise things that you cannot deliver, then you're not really being ambitious, because some people can call it ambition and say, I will engage with the national government. I will go to the office of the, director at Kenha or Kura. But what you end up doing is that you end up misleading people. So don't make promises you can't deliver. It is not ambition. You become a misleader. Next is what I call power versus influence. And here you need to know what you can directly implement in your position, in your mandate. What can you directly implement versus what can you influence? I hope you can get the difference. What can you implement? What is within your ambit? As an MCA, what bill, for example, can I bring to the county assembly for implementation? What can you influence? Given that position, if I become an MCA, this is what I will influence. Meaning that you're not directly the implementer, but because of the access that you get, because of that position that you will get, you can influence. And thirdly, what can you advocate for? And here it's very important to say that for many people, the vehicle with which you get into these positions is normally the political party. So if your political party has a position on one item, but you yourself are advocating for an opposite position, then will the party really give you, that ticket? What can you advocate for? And this calls for understanding, if you belong to a political party or are working with a political party, to understand what is the position of the party. And that can be nuanced because people can think a party may come in the way of implementation, a party may, make people miss out on things that they need. But the reality on the ground, the reality of the matter is political parties will determine what you can advocate for. I'll give an example. If, say, you belong to a party, a party that is very conservative, a party that is very conservative, that does not be that believes in marriage to one woman or one man, that believes in the family unit as the basic core of a society. If you belong to such a party, but then you find out that there is either people within your constituency or ward who want you to advocate for, freedom to love whoever you want to love, uh, or what people will call sexual minority rights. And they say, let us love, advocate for us to love whoever we want to love. And they even say there is funding for this, and they even give you funding for this. Are you able to really advocate for that using your party? What can you advocate for? Strong leaders know the difference between the authority and influence, and they therefore design your policy accordingly. Next slide. From promises to budgets. Every policy must answer the question, what does it cost? And who pays? What does it cost? And who pays? For many of the proposals for many of the ordinary proposals, I would say, the payer can always be known early in advance. Depending on the design of your policy, depending on what particular problem you want to solve, the who pays question can be easier to answer. Because if it is taxpayer money, then you must understand the budget process, and you know that when after the elections, if you don't already understand the budget cycle, I hope that someone will take you through that budget cycle in Kenya. But after the elections, immediately after the elections, one of the first roles that the governor has in a county is to develop what we call the CIDP, County Integrated Development Plan. And this is a 5-year plan. And so this plan says in the next 5 years, this will be our focus areas. These are the things that we will want to do as a county, and this is what they are likely to cost as a rough estimate. And then every year they have the annual development plan, or the ADP. And so if you're a leader who's forward thinking and you want to actually deliver for your people, then it is incumbent upon you to understand or to know what the CIDP is. So what is the general plan of the county? Where is the county intending to put money in? What is the county intending to fund? And then every year in the budget cycle, they say, okay, so we had this plan for 5 years, but for the next 1 year, this will be our focus. So once you know what is in the ADP, then you can be able to, craft your subsequent agenda. And this comes really after you're in office, after you cross that line, to craft your agenda for your constituents or for people in your ward, and say this is because this is what the county is going to fund, and this is where they're going to put money. I am going to craft my policy proposal around what money has actually been set up or set aside for already. So if the county said they wanted to increase or to improve education, improve basic education, then if I have a plan around ECDs, then I can easily get money from the county to do that. But as an outsider, this may not be easy for you to know because ADPs and say ADPs, the county integrated development plans and the annual development plans are not documents that are easy to read. They are voluminous. They are written in economic jargon that you may not understand. But I cannot emphasize enough that despite their difficulty to understand, as one who actually wants to deliver, you must understand that. A good example of leaders who've understood that are those leaders who, in their counties or in their constituencies or in their wards, you see them doing so much, yet in a neighboring constituency or ward, a leader with the same resources or with the same opportunities is not able to do the same things. I'm sure you have seen what has happened in Murang'a County, particularly Kiharu constituency, where the MP has done so much with the same CDF or with the same money that another MP has, and who has not done anything at all for his constituency. It basically calls to understanding where the budget is, what the budget is, I mean, and what the plans are for the long term and for the short term, for the 5 years and for the 1 year. For many of our positions in Kenya, the budget or whoever pays for it can be a county budget, and so this will, of course, come from the appropriations of the National Assembly and the Senate. It may be a national allocation. The president might say that I want to, help in this country do more of program XYZ, for example. And so if you are forward thinking as a leader, then you would craft your policy proposal or your policy agenda around what the national government is intending to fund. It could be public-private partnerships. And this in Kenya are usually difficult to structure because their structure mechanism is a little complicated, but they do happen and they work. It can be your private organization as an individual agreeing to work with the county to partner to deliver. So it can be, I will use the name of Mwoki. The Mwoki Foundation. Say Mwoki is a leader at the county. They can decide to create their own foundation, and this is easy to structure in Kenya. Create your own foundation, and then say that with the county, this is what if we partner with the county, given that my passion is this, or what my foundation does is this, and the county has interest in doing the same matter, we can partner. I will bring the expertise, and the county can bring in the money, and we together can deliver. In general, that is how PPPs can work. And that is something that even as leaders, you can consider. Then finally, there's donor funding. And this, if you're good at writing proposals, funding proposals, then it can be a low-hanging fruit, because I can tell you that there's a lot of money out there. It just needs you to know who to ask from. Again, this calls for a lot of research, seeing what areas of interest, what areas interest the donors, what areas are they willing to put money in, and are you credible enough to deliver? I think it's important to say at this time that given that I was in charge of donor funding at Parliament, I was able to manage a lot of funds. The thing about donor funding is that this money, unlike taxpayer money in Kenya, no one will call the legislators to handle, and so I mean to account for, and so it is very possible for this money to be misused because donor shapeana. All they want from you is a report and an accounting of the money. And so if you're not careful, this money can land you into problems. You might be blacklisted, or you might never receive funding again. I need to say here that I actually resigned from parliament, believe it or not, because of this issue of donor funding. As I said, I was managing a lot of funds, and because I wanted to keep my integrity at a time when this fund was under attack by several legislators who wanted to take it to go and use it in campaigns, I thought it better to keep my good name and save my reputation within the donor community rather than misuse this fund and use it instead for campaigns. I think the point to say here is if you cannot answer who will pay, then your policy does not exist. If you cannot answer the question of how will this be funded, then your policy cannot come to life. Next. So what are some of the realistic funding pathways? Firstly, there's a reallocation. So this can be reprioritizing budgets. We may have and this happens in every county, in countries even, where, as the year begins, or as once you're elected in office, your work begins. And then as you go along, you realize that mm, maybe I need to put money in something else. Or I need to put money in something else that is more pressing at the time. If you can remember when we began this administration, the emphasis that was on climate change, you could have thought that, at any point in time, even the skies would fall and Kenya would become a desert, and we would no longer be able to live in Kenya and even on Earth because of how climate change was a big issue. And a lot of our money and resources was going into climate change. But as time went along, I don't even hear anyone talking about climate change anymore. Maybe it has already changed, but no one talks about it anymore. What really is happening is there's a reprioritizing of the budget, reallocation. For this to be, for reallocation to happen, it can either happen because of actual needs on the ground, actual needs that come up, or because of politics. And as a good politician, you should be able to engage with the budget holders to show them or to demonstrate to them that whatever you're funding now is no longer a priority. The priority now is this, and you need to fund it, fund this. And this here represents, your policy proposal. Another one is efficiency gains. And here, money coming out or getting funding because, you've reduced wastage. And like I told you, when I worked with legislators, part of the goal was to identify the places in the budget or in the fiscal management system that they could then be able to get money to fund their activities. So within the budget, what are the areas that if we reduce wastage, then as legislators, we will push for either closure of certain projects or a cessation of certain initiatives so that other events or other initiatives can take precedence. So efficiency gains. Another one is partnerships, and this I cannot overemphasize. As a leader, you will always need to partner. All these people that you see on stage or on diocese doing tours every weekend and campaigning every other place, and they seem to have a lot of money to move around. A lot of that is because of partnerships. partnerships with the private sector, and they're and this also has a lot to do with politics, because, for example, if say I'm a private sector leader who is interested in uh, in mining, for example, uh, one of the ways that I, as a sector uh, private sector person or individual or entity, can be able to get my way within the mining industry is to partner with the legislators that actually make laws around mining. And so I will say that your partnership is what, on the surface and without proper knowledge, can be called corruption or bribery, but really it is partnering. You, as the legislator, can decide uh, because Bidco Oil, and I'm using Bidco here as an example. Bidco is interested in getting more raw materials from farmers at the coast. Either people who plant grains from which the oil is gotten, and they do that at the coast a lot. Because I know that Bidco is interested in the raw materials, and I am a representative from the coast. How about we partner so that in the course of our partnership, I can be able to access the funding that they have, and I can be able to, in the process, give solutions to my people so that it is a win-win. Bidco gets the raw materials and input, and I am able to get funding. And this again is dependent on how you're able to engage and how you defend your case and how you lobby. Politics really is a lot about lobbying. And then finally, another realistic funding pathway is donor funding. And like I said, a lot of money is out there for for very many things that could be funded. It all depends on how you can well craft your policy agenda to access that funding. And I am happy to, in subsequent times, or if you can find me privately, to be able to shed some more light on how these funds can be accessed. Next slide. The best policy platforms are not invented. We're not calling you here to create something that has not been created before. The best policy platforms are aggregated from lived realities. You meet people, you do your barazas, you do your surveys, you do your digital engagement, and you do your stakeholder mapping. When you do your public forums, that is when you understand what are the pain points of the people, what are the things that they would like to have changed, or what are the issues that are burning them, that if you as a leader came in, you would be able to help. Of course, given that you understand your mandate and you understand the constitutional design that allows you to execute that mandate. So public forums, I cannot emphasize enough again. You need to participate in those forums, call for them, attend them. I'm sure you've always seen how whenever there's a gathering, a politician appears. If there's a church service, if there's a funeral, they appear. They want to listen to the ground, but they also want to sell their agenda. So attend those forums, participate in them. Surveys, this you can always do if you have great following, or if you can use a third party, perhaps someone who has bigger following. Conduct a survey within that region to understand what are their pain points, to identify the problem. Remember the policy cycle. When you identify the problem, surveys can be a good way. Next is digital engagement. We live in the age of social media. Do not let the opportunity that social media provides escape you. Engage socially, engage digitally, so that you can be able to extract the value of digital engagement. Digital engagement these days has become a way that you remain in people's attention. Everywhere you go, you will always find an old man, your parents, they are on TikTok. They've decided to follow someone, so because of the kind of content they generate. And I'm sure you around you, you've seen or you encounter, either your parents or much older people from up country always sending you something from one particular content creator. It's an avenue that you also, as a potential leader, as a candidate in this coming elections, as an aspirant, can consider to engage digitally. And there's immense opportunity and immense growth that you can get from that. And then map your stakeholders so that you can be able to well put in uh, their their ideas. Do your stakeholder mapping, and in stakeholder mapping, we always say, know who has the power, know who has the influence, know who you need to please, and know who you need to give attention to. Next. And here is where very many people either get it right or get it wrong. This is the line that determines if you make it. What is your signature issue? What is that one thing that if the voters forget everything else about you, this issue they will remember? That issue has to be clear, has to be relevant, has to make sense to them, has to be memorable, something that they cannot forget. It has to be defensible, something that you can defend, that you can stand your ground, stand on any platform, be on radio or on interviews and defend. It also has to be something that is actionable, something that you can actually do, not something that is way too ambitious and way too grand to actually be actioned or achieved. So a good policy platform for you as an aspirant is to make sure that you have a clear, relevant, memorable, defensible, and actionable issue. You may, as remember we said earlier, reduce your priority areas to between 3 to 5. But around that, have that. It's always important to have that one main agenda that if anyone forgets everything you said, they will remember that. And Kenyan politics is a wonderful example of that. If you can remember anything from the 2022 elections, you just remember that it used to be hustlers versus dynasty. And every Kenyan, even the rich Kenyans, were made to feel like they were hustlers. And it was time for them as hustlers to be part of the bigger thing, to be part of the government. The signature issue. What is your signature issue? In the in the 20 uh, in the 2013 elections, when Uhuru and Ruto joined together to form their National Alliance, which became later on the Party of National Unity. The signature issue then was unity. Remember, they were both inductees of the International Criminal Court. And they had to find a way of ensuring that they remain relevant in people's minds, they're memorable, and they could defend their issue, and that their issue was actionable. And they said, in the last, in over 2007, we were warring tribes. It was the Kikuyus that were or that were involved in conflict with the Kalenjins. And so this is to unite us as Kenyans. We are putting our past and our differences apart, and we're uniting to build a united Kenya. Tell me who would not want to be part of that, to be part of a united Kenya. And they were there taking photos in matching clothes and matching ties, and they looked like it was such a happy couple that everyone wanted to be part of this. So yes, make your issue relevant and clear and memorable, actionable and defensible. You can defend it. Next. Avoid generic promises. Generic promises can be, I will improve healthcare. What about healthcare will you improve? You know, I will improve education. I will improve accessibility to water. But can be too general. So when you're designing your policy platform, be very specific. Not just say I will improve healthcare. You can say I will digitize county clinics within, I don't know, 2 years. Or I will ring fence ward development funds if MCAs ever get it for water access. So what you're saying is, if I'm to access this funding, then the issue that I will deal with will be water access within this ward, to include perhaps if it is to sink more boreholes, or to increase the pipeline, or work with the regulators to increase the pipeline, the authorities to increase the pipeline, but have issues that are not generic, but be specific, be measurable, and be time bound. Next. Having a manifesto. And I'm sure you've engaged in and engaged with manifestos. You've seen them. You know you've dismissed some of them. You've probably said these manifestos all look alike, because we are not really changing anything. In fact, for some political parties, the only thing different within their manifestos is the color scheme. But in general, as an aspirant and as a leader, when you build your manifesto, it should have a vision. And here, vision is, what would you like to see? What would you like to see? And this question of what would you like to see comes from having understood what the people want. After you've done your problem identification and you've seen that, okay, the problem I have in this ward, the problem I seek to solve is this, because it is affecting many people. And therefore, if I make it an issue that is core in my manifesto and solve it, then my vision will be, I will have reduced this problem, or I will have reduced or mitigated the effect of this issue. So have a vision, then have your key priorities. Then with those key priorities, what are your policy proposals? And remember here, policy is really what you want to do to solve a certain problem. We always define public policy as what the government does to solve a societal problem in order to achieve specific outcomes. So as a leader within your own right, what are the policy proposals? What is the set of actions that I will do in order to change or to affect the society in this way to achieve these outcomes? Then have your implementation plan and have a budget for them. As during campaigns, this budget does not have to be detailed and to the letter, but it can be a general budget or a budget with estimations of what it would cost you to implement it. And then finally have a timeline within which, if you have your vision, your priorities, your proposals, your implementation plan, and your budget logic in order, then you'll be able to implement it within that timeline. Next. Common fixed pitfalls. And I think we began with this, trying to fix everything. As a leader, you are not God. You're not a God. You're not Santa Claus. You're not Father Christmas. You cannot fix everything. Like we said, identify a few issues, 3 to 5, that will be the core. If you're able to solve more, well and good. But in the design of your policy proposal, my proposal to you is pick 3 issues that you will hammer and deliver on. Secondly, another common pitfall is ignoring the budget constraints. Wanting to deliver Canaan on a Jericho budget. And then thirdly is copy pasting ideas. You copy paste ideas, and what that means is that you are not able to defend it or defend them because you do not own them. And then lastly, having no implementation clarity. You don't know how you will execute. Wewe unataka tu upite hiyo njia, ukuwe elected. And then once you're elected, you have no plan, you have no implementation strategy. Wewe uko tu. I'll give you an example, and because this is a public figure, I will not be afraid to mention names. In the parliament between 2013 and 2017, there was a legislator who was nominated to represent young people in Kenya. So as you know, after the elections, the leading parties, the parties with the larger numbers, are given opportunities through the party list to nominate persons to join the Senate, the nominated senators, as we call them. And usually they represent certain interests. So they could be to represent women interests, to represent workers, to represent youth, to represent persons with disabilities, and things like those. So in that parliament, I think it was the 11th, was it the 11th or 12th parliament? There was a senator who was nominated to represent the youth. This senator had no implementation clarity, no execution plan. He had no ideas. He didn't understand the budget process. And he didn't even try to fix anything, let alone trying to fix everything, which is a common pitfall. And remember, this is a senator representing young people. Even if I say his name, you guys will not even know him. I can't even remember how his face looks like. His name was Senator Hosea Onchwangi. Nobody knows how he looks like. I don't think any of you knows how he looks like, unless he's probably your relative. But not having a clarity of how to execute your ideas, not having, the frame of mind to think about the budgets, made him so forgettable that we don't even remember how he looks like. In fact, some people said that during his time in Senate, he never spoke a word. The only time he spoke was when he was being sworn in. And then after that election, he disappeared and has never been heard from to date. But I think he's still alive somewhere. So do not fall into those common pitfalls. You'll become like a fire that lights too quickly, and then once you burn and you become so forgettable. I think I'm drawing to a close. What is the next slide? Yes, so I think as we conclude, it would be good for you to try and engage in this process. Try to identify a problem, and then the solution. And the problem identification here may require some research, may require you to go to the ground, may require you to ask questions within the area or the place you want to be a leader of. Conduct your research, identify the problem. Then, given that this is the problem, what is the solution? What can be done to mitigate that problem? And then, and this is just a template. And then, what is the legal mandate? Am I able to do this? If I am to run for this position as, say, MCA, having identified this problem and this solution, do I have the legal mandate to actually push for it? In other words, you need to identify the things that you can implement, the things that you can influence, and the things that in that position you can advocate for. And then what are the implementation steps to solve this problem that I have identified, whose legal mandate I have? I will need to first do this, then do this, and do this. Then do a cost estimate. Do a cost estimate and say, for me to fully implement this, I'd probably need this thousands or these millions as a general estimate. And then identify what could be your sources of funding. How will this be funded? Is this something that I can get donor funding for? Is this something that I can do a public-private partnership? Is this something that is already budgeted for the national or in the county budgets, and therefore it's a budget that I could access given my position? What is the timeline? It's always great to have a timeline because it gives both you as the implementer and the voter, it gives also the voter it manages the expectations. They know what to expect when. And it gives you the pressure to actually deliver. And it gives you some backbone to stand on and say, this is something I did within the time which you people elected me or nominated me to deliver it, and I have delivered it. It is a good bargaining chip when you want to seek re-election. Really identify what is the timeline, and then what is the expected impact. I think I am at a close. Yes. I think this can be a good takeaway. That a good policy platform is not just what sounds good, it is what can be done. What can you really do? What can you really achieve? It's not enough to be a smooth talker who stands and says excellent things, but it is really what can you do? What can you really achieve? So that you're not misleading by by saying things that end up being or sounding over ambitious, but actually saying things that are actionable. I think with that, I will draw to a close and invite any questions, any comments, and those that I can answer with the experience and knowledge I have, I'll be happy to engage. Asanteni sana.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful session. I think it's time to ask the questions. And I can see there are quite a number on the comment section, so I'll just put them up on the screen. Yes, I'll start with this one from Siyat, and he asks, how can the county assembly member partner with National Assembly to seek for donor-supported funds to lobby for his ward? Is there a specific department to approach?
All right, officially, there is really no particular office that you can approach. However, well, constitutionally, there is no office that you can approach, but there are forums that have been designed that help the national parliament and the county assemblies to work together. One of them which I greatly worked on was the what we call the County Assemblies Forum. So this County Assemblies Forum brings together counties, and then every year, of course, through a planning process, they conduct what they call a legislative summit. And really, this one looks at how the Senate and the county assemblies can work together. But in terms of seeking donor support, it really depends on the structure of the organization, because I will tell you for free that it is very unlikely for donors to support individuals unless it is a sponsorship, to do a program of theirs in their country where they have more control. But to give you money as an individual can be difficult. And so perhaps a workaround around it can be having an organization. So what we did as KYPA then, the Kenyan Parliamentarians Association, was we brought together young members of parliament. But because we also wanted to work with MCAs, we brought them in, and we said that one of the goals of this project was to help young MCAs form their own association. And I am proud and happy to say that I am part of the team that formed the Kenya Young MCAs Association, which is a very big caucus for young MCAs in Kenya now. So officially and constitutionally, there is no structure, but there are avenues for partnership, but it requires to access donor funding, because donor funding really works best with organizations, that you form an organization or you work with an organization that can then be funded by a donor.
And I think your question already answers what Mike is asking, and he's asking: is it a must to have a registered organization when you are sourcing for donor funding? And that already,
Yes, it is always best, because on donors also want to know that that money can be accounted for, and an organization provides structure around that. So it shows that the accounts can be audited, and there can be better accountability for the funds that they're giving you. But you see, if you give me money as an individual, nothing stops me from walking out here, buying young people car washing machines, and starting my campaign.
indeed, accountability is one major thing within the donor funding space.
Absolutely.
And the other question is probably he is generally wondering how they can get connected to partners or donors that they can, work with for the sake of their work.
This is like job hunting. You knock on doors. You must be able to articulate why you want to partner or why you want this funding. So articulation here can be verbally as well as on paper. It's best on paper because sometimes they will tell you, okay, write us a proposal. So you need to be able to write a proposal that is clear, keeping in mind all these things that we have spoken about, and that shows things that you can achieve, shows things that you can measure, and the kind of impact that you can make. And then once you've done this, it is a lot of research. Scour through the internet. For many of these organizations, and I'm sure even if you look, for example, into Moki's organization, for example, you might see on their website that this is supported by, and then you see perhaps an organization. And that can be a starting point, because now you can look for organizations like this, that support whatever I want to engage in. So it is a lot of research. There is no single office that you go to and you get all the partners. Some of them are very hidden. Some of them are in far-flung countries that you may never even think about, but they do have the money and they do support. They can support your proposals.
Okay, another question is bringing it up. Communities often face multiple challenges at once. Now, what framework can young leaders use to determine which issues should become policy priorities?
Welcome to public policy and politics. So here, there's what we call in the policy process agenda setting. So once you've identified the problem, and like you say, there could be very many problems. Agenda setting is the process of prioritization. For example, as an individual, like if we can give an example of an individual, you can be hungry and naked at the same time and feeling sick, but you're one person, and I'm here to help you, for example. So if I'm here to help you, should I first clothe you, feed you, or give you treatment? Both of them are very urgent needs that require urgent attention. But the process of agenda setting is what determines what you can prioritize. So it is very nuanced. There is no right answer, but it is one that requires, again, to continually engage with that community, because as you understand the community, you will understand that maybe their sickness is more urgent than them needing clothes. So first, let me treat them. Or there may be a community that values, that puts more value on shame. And so they say, before you feed me or treat me, please clothe me first. So understanding the community's needs and the community's values is also very important. For example, you will see that campaigns in Kenya will revolve around, I will build roads, I will build hospitals, I will build houses. That is not a campaign that you can, for example, take to America. They have roads, they have houses, they have, all these things. They want more. They're now looking for other things. I want someone who will allow me to love whoever I want. So understanding the values of the community also helps you in being able to prioritize which of their needs ranks higher, so that it makes it to the top of the agenda. So it is very nuanced. There's no one answer, but it requires understanding of the community culture.
And now that you brought it up, let me just link your response to this, because they're more or less they are linked. How can emerging leaders ensure that the policies they are developing are genuinely informed by community realities rather than their own assumptions and trends?
Excellent question. And part of the process of developing policy is when you identify the problem and you begin the policy formulation, there's a lot of research that goes in. And research here is not just what you're thinking or what you felt has been the problem. Research means going to the ground. Remember, I said earlier, attend those forums, go to the ground and understand the needs. Because many times you find that the policy decisions ultimately become informed by politics, so that you're solving a political problem rather than the actual problem of the people. And An example, for example, is say if you're solving a housing problem in Nairobi, or say you want to build, and I'm using this because it is a live example, or you want to do affordable housing in in uh, in Uasin Gishu. In Uasin Gishu, everyone, in fact, people own land. People are living in their own compounds, and suddenly you want to, build apartments. So what then it becomes is you are implementing a policy that is in informed by your assumption that Kenyans need housing. It might be true that Kenyans might need housing, but not throughout Kenya. You get so uh, that process of policy formulation uh, can be influenced by politics, which means that you may end up developing and even implementing or trying to implement policies that are based of assumptions or based off of trends rather than the actual problems that the communities need solutions for.
Okay, thank you so much. I think there are about three more questions left. One of those is a policy platform may sound good on paper, but implementation is usually the biggest challenge. What systems or habits should leaders build to improve accountability and deliver once elected or appointed?
That is a good question. Uh, when I was in Tanzania and studying public policy, I was reminded how uh, back in the early in the 70s and 80s and even 90s, Kenya was excellent at developing policy on paper. In fact, some of the policies that are implemented in most successful countries actually were developed from Kenya. But then in reality, Kenya does not implement them. Kenya uh, engages in something else outside of implementing that policy. I think the habits that leaders can build to improve accountability and delivery once elected is firstly always listening to the people. Like for me, I find it very important that leaders must always be connected to the people. You can't be as a leader so shielded from the ground that you never know the problems of the people, that you never know if the solution you're implementing is actually changing their lives. A leader must be very connected to the problems, to the ground, to the people that they are representing. Uh, Another thing that leader can do to help improve that is uh, being open to being allowing some level of criticism, and this can mean that you have some kind of open door policy where people can come in and tell you and talk to you. People can tell you that you have done wrong in this, because for many people, uh, once you're elected a leader, and you will always see this, and it is a pitfall that we used to talk to young legislators about. You're not elected and you suddenly become the wisest person in the room. You are elected. Kama ulikuwa makanga jana na umekuwa elected leo, bado kuna umakanga iko ndani yako. You've not become suddenly the wisest person. But oftentimes you find them already wanting to run to media to answer difficult questions. You find them wanting to take part in conversations that are beyond them. So improving accountability also means knowing your own, understanding that, knowing your own incapacities at the time and building on those incapacities so that you become better at what you do, which is what you are doing at KYPA, to help legislators become better by building their capacity. Once you understand the budget, then you can go on TV and talk about budget. Once you understand the fiscal process, once you understand, then you can go out and actually talk and actually implement. So habits that you could do: allow for criticism, but also build your own capacity. Do not ever fail to want to become better. at what you do.
Thank you. Um, uh, Now, you sort of did mention somewhere that we don't get to have, or most of the time we get to have leaders who promise that they're going to build roads, they're going to build hospitals as an MCA, while that really isn't the mandate of an MCA or of an MP. So maybe just as a refresher, could you go through some of the roles of an MCA and an MP so that we are all informed and we go back to our drawing boards and just ensure that our manifestos really align with what is expected of us?
Thank you. So, in general, I will start with how their roles are very similar. So they are all MCAs and MPs are all legislators. They all do the work of the legislature, which is to make laws. There are the three main roles of the legislature are to legislate, which is to make laws, to represent, and to oversight. So in general, those are the roles. So it doesn't matter at which level you are, you'll always be a representative, you'll always be making laws, and you'll always be oversighting the government within which you work. As an MCA, your role is only limited to your role of oversight and legislation and representation is only limited to the county and the ward that you represent or that you are elected in. So as an MCA, you're able to make laws for the county. And making laws for the county means that you must understand what the county can do, what is the mandate of the county government, and then therefore be able to legislate around those mandates of the county government. So legislation making laws, for example, understanding what has been devolved. It requires that one person, a person understands what has been devolved. So for example, early childhood education has been devolved, is a devolved function. Noise pollution is a devolved function. Uh, Physical planning is a devolved function. Therefore, as an MCA, you can legislate around the issues that have been devolved. So you can say a county, if I'm an MCA in, say, Kiambu County, then as as an MCA of Kiambu County, the legislation or the legislative proposals that I can bring are around the things that are devolved. Say, for example, physical planning. And so say I want to make a proposal that these areas of Kiambu County will be zoned for industrialization and these areas be zoned for agriculture. That is within the ambit of the MCA. An MP for say Dagoretti South cannot therefore begin to legislate on a function that has been devolved. They can only legislate on functions that still remain with the national government. And so it is important, and as a student of law and someone who works in policy, I always have this document, the Constitution of Kenya, which is something I will implore you to have, to memorize if you can, especially around the areas that you are interested in. If you're an MCA, understand the devolved functions so that when you're campaigning, when you are going to the ground and you're talking to people, you can actually talk about what is constitutionally guaranteed and protected for you to be able to engage in. So their roles are very similar, just that they act on different levels. Again, as it is, the Constitution, of course, is not an exhaustive document. And so there are laws that have been enacted by the Senate and by the National Assembly to help bring this document to life. And some of those statutes that have been implemented outline and clarify the various roles of MCAs and the roles of MPs, and further clarify the role that is around MPs, because MPs refer to both members of the Senate and members of the National Assembly. So the statutes have further clarified what those roles are. So my bottom line, uh, notwithstanding the amount of refresher I can give you, this document is your friend. Please read it, print it, download it, and go through it as much as you can.
Okay, thank you. Our second last question is, how can a beginner who doesn't have enough capital compete with someone who has been in leadership for a long time and he or she has enough resources and can do anything for upcoming leaders?
Hey, having worked in this space for a while, I have seen people campaign without money, but I've also seen people campaign with money. And for a system in Kenya, the system that we have where money makes a lot of difference, it is an unfair competition. For a beginner who doesn't have enough capital, you begin at a disadvantage because you know, like you say, someone can do anything. But the other side of the coin is we have seen people who've done it before. And how they've done it is they have connected with the community at levels that money cannot. They have gone to people's homes, they have eaten with people in their houses, they have attended their funerals, they have condoled with them, rejoiced with them, and people have seen them as more one of us. Remember representation. Remember, these elective positions are about representation. And representation, that's a subject that is much deeper. I wrote my thesis on it. Representation can be descriptive or substantive. And representation being descriptive means we want someone who looks like us. So if you can hack that element of representation to look like the people you are representing, then it might just be an advantage for you if you don't have money. You saw, for example, the John Paul Mwirigis of I think it was Imenti, was it Imenti West or Imenti South? But South, one of those places in Meru, who campaigned on a bicycle with one sweater. And in fact, he came in the same clothes to parliament when he came for the first time because he had not been paid a salary and he was still broke. But he was able to identify with the people. He was able to, the people, in fact, people were able to identify with him. There's a KJ of Dagoretti South. When he first came in, he came in as one who all people could remember was the many jokes he used to say many years back. But the people were able to identify with him. And he, during his campaigns, because I lived in Dagoretti South at the time, he was moving from house to house. He was sitting with people, talking about his concrete plans of what he wants to do. And people felt like this person is really like us. So it helps to do that. But it also helps if you're one without enough capital to participate in political parties. Remember, I said political parties are the vehicles with which people get into into leadership in Kenya, into parliament or county assemblies. So if you're able to participate in political parties, and this will mean going for the events, trying to take up positions within those, even if they're not paying you. Remember, I told you the first 2 years of my work was unpaid. In fact, some of the stories or some of the things I used to do just to make sure I was within my own personal budget when I was not being paid for 2 years are ridiculous, if I told you. But for me, it was important that I stayed there, I understood, I took part. So that when the time came, I was the reliable person. They could say, this one can take this position and can manage these funds. So if you don't have money, identify with the people and let the people identify with you. And how you do that is, ground interactions. But at the flip side of the coin, or the other side of things, is engage in political parties. Engage in political parties. It is hard to be an independent and be broke and want to get office. It can be very hard. But if you can engage with political parties, so that you take a position, so that even if you don't run, they can decide to nominate you or give you a position that pays you enough to be able to do more in your campaign and be able to have more impact. So engage in political parties. They're a good avenue for you to engage. Propaganda, to overcome propaganda during campaigns, eh, especially in this age and day and age. Yesterday, I saw a clip someone had created purely of AI of I think it was a depiction of Senator Malala having scripted the abduction and disappearance of Tuju, and and it was all AI. And if you send this to someone up country, they will think that it is real because all the renderings of everyone looked so perfect. We are living at a time when propaganda is difficult to when propaganda is increasing, every day is becoming more complex, in fact, more difficult to decipher. In fact, I can say for a matter of fact that in 2013, is it 2013? Yes, in 2013, was it 2017? But one of those, Raila lost the elections purely because of propaganda. And we had one of those Western companies called Cambridge Analytica, which was brought in by, I think it was Uhuru's regime, to try and build enough propaganda to scare away the Mount Kenya vote from voting for Raila. So it can be very difficult. You might have the best policies, but propaganda, the reality is hit the ground, connect with the people so that they can be able to say, hii ni uongo. Huu tunamjua na hii ni uongo. But in this day and age, it is difficult to fight propaganda. I mean, even Raila and I think, I don't know whether it was the CORD party or it was it NAC or CORD, but one of those coalitions found it impossible to counter the propaganda that had been pushed by Cambridge Analytica for, I think it was Uhuru at the time. So that in the end, he lost the election. He lost the Mount Kenya vote. Let me not say the election, but he lost the Mount Kenya vote because of that propaganda, some of which persists to date, even though Raila himself has passed away. But there are people who still believe Raila, if he became president, he would make us wear shorts. He would, do basically things that do not make sense. But yeah, bottom line, propaganda is very powerful, and it becomes more powerful in this day and age of the internet and AI and connectivity. But one of the ways you can counter that is by being close to the ground, letting people identify with you even as you identify with them, so that then they can say, hii ni uongo, hii si ukweli.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Sule. That was indeed very, very, very powerful. And I think, I don't know, this session is one of those sessions that everybody, those who are in this call, need a lot. And hopefully, based on the timing and the state of the program, I hope we can come back to you in the next couple of days or weeks and just let you know that, you know what, hey, our participants are still asking for a session on two on policies, and maybe you can probably go, deep on it this time. And if your schedule allows, you can actually come back and share something something with us. But otherwise, as we conclude tonight's session, I hope everyone has marked themselves present using the link that was shared. And we said our secret word or our secret code for today is policy. And as we conclude today's session, one important reminder that I think for me stands out is that leadership is not only about influence, but also, having clear, credible, and actionable, that can improve people's lives. And I hope as we move from this place, we're going to, begin thinking about strong policies as platforms that are built through listening, through critical thinking, and preparation and a genuine understanding of the community realities. Do not come up with policies because you feel like that is what is going to be good for your own family. Think about the communities and let your policies be a reflection of what your communities need. Thank you so much to our facilitator. As we conclude, maybe just for all the participants, if you're still on the live, just drop a few hearty claps for him in the comment section to thank him, and also let those claps be for you for taking your time. This is like almost the second hour into the conversation, and thank you so much for your time. We do look forward to meeting you all again, same place, same time, different face, and more wisdom next week. Until then, have a wonderful evening and have a wonderful campaign throughout the rest of the week.